In the second decade of the 20th century, humanity witnessed a war like never before. From 1914 to 1918, the world was engulfed in what the powerful leaders of the time called the War to End All Wars. But as history would soon show, it didn't. To prevent such a bloody catastrophe from happening again, an international organization called the League of Nations was formed, which we can think of as the predecessor of today's United Nations. Historians argue that the aftermath of World War I actually planted the seeds for the next global conflict, and just 2 decades later, the world was again caught in the flames of war. This conflict, of course, is known as World War II, and it became the deadliest war in human history. Officially lasting from 1939 to 1945, it involved nearly 30 countries directly, and the total death toll exceeded 85 million people. Out of these, more than 55 million were civilians. During this war, the Nazis' indiscriminate extermination of Jews, known as the Holocaust, marked one of the darkest chapters in human history, with at least 6 million Jewish people killed. If you want a detailed look at World War I, you can check out our other video. But for now, let's focus on World War II. After World War I, the victorious Allied powers took a very strict stance against the defeated empires. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was dismantled, giving rise to about 10 new states. The Ottoman Empire was divided between Britain and France, though Turkey declared itself an independent state. Germany, under the Treaty of Versailles, had to pay hefty reparations. Western border regions were handed to France and Belgium, while a new state called Poland was carved out in the east, leaving millions of Germans outside Germany. German military forces were heavily restricted. Tanks, artillery, and an air force were banned, and the army was limited to 100,000 men. Unsurprisingly, this angered the German public. Italy, too, was upset because the Allies had promised them territories along the eastern Adriatic coast for their role in the war, but failed to deliver, even though 600,000 Italians had died during the war. This widespread frustration paved the way for the rise of far-right movements in Germany and Italy in the 1920s. Europe's war-torn economies only strengthened these extremist forces. In Germany, hyperinflation reached staggering levels. In November 1918, $1 was worth 4 marks. By November 1923, it was almost 4.2 trillion marks. Germany simply couldn't pay the reparations. At that time, the country was known as the Weimar Republic, and when France and Belgium occupied the Ruhr industrial region in protest, public unrest intensified. This is when Mussolini came to power in Italy in 1928, banned all political opposition, and established fascism. The following year, the stock market crash in New York, known as the Wall Street crash, triggered the Great Depression, a global economic catastrophe. Germany's economy shrank. Unemployment among young people reached over 30%, and the population protested against the government. In the general election of July 1932, the far-right NSDAP, led by Adolf Hitler, won decisively. Hitler was appointed the head of the government. Once in power, he declared all other political parties illegal, following Mussolini's example. In 1933, Germany stopped paying reparations, withdrew from the Treaty of Versailles, and began rebuilding its military. Military training became mandatory for able-bodied youth. While the international community criticized him, his domestic popularity soared.
By 1935, Hitler had introduced pan-Germanism, a doctrine claiming that pure-blooded Germans were members of the Aryan race and the world's superior people with blonde hair and blue eyes. Jews and Marxists were considered the lowest of humanity. Hitler, notorious as the father of Nazism, proposed a final solution to establish a global Aryan empire and eradicate Jews and Marxists. He even began implementing these policies within Germany. In 1935, Italy decided to expand its colonies in Africa, launching a military campaign in Ethiopia. Meanwhile, in Spain, General Francisco Franco led an uprising against the ruling monarchy, receiving military support from Italy and Germany. In 1936, Germany and Italy signed a bilateral military pact known as the Rome-Berlin Axis. That same year, Germany signed a separate pact with Japan. Japan had also been struggling post-World War I. In 1931, it occupied Manchuria, a province of China. And when Civil War broke out in 1936, Japan expanded its military presence further. In 1937, Japanese forces committed the brutal Nanjing Massacre, killing around 300,000 Chinese civilians. By 1938, the Nazi Party gained power in neighboring Austria, which then unified with Germany. Encouraged, Hitler set his sights on Czechoslovakia, ultimately occupying large parts in early 1939. After securing its southeastern borders, Germany turned its attention to Poland, demanding the return of territories lost after World War I. Britain and France warned that an attack on Poland would trigger war. Meanwhile, Italy occupied Albania, and Japan began a conflict with the Soviet Union over its Mongolian border. After setbacks, Japan focused southward, planning to seize European colonies in Southeast Asia. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland without warning. True to their word, Britain and France declared war. Germany employed the blitzkrieg strategy, using tanks and mechanized forces to swiftly break enemy lines and encircle them. Poland's military could not mount a strong resistance. While Germany advanced westward, Britain and France prepared for a long conflict along Germany's western borders, similar to World War I, a mistake that allowed Germany to take western Poland. The Soviet Union also occupied eastern Poland and deployed forces along Finland's borders. The conflict between Finland and the Soviet Union became known as the Winter War. Despite the Soviets' superior military, Finland resisted effectively, leading to a peace agreement in March 1940. Hitler took note of the Soviet weakness, fueling his desire to invade. Meanwhile, Britain and France imposed a blockade on Germany via the North Sea, threatening its fuel imports. In response, Germany invaded Denmark and Norway in April 1940 to secure supply routes. In May, German forces occupied the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. The Allies assumed Germany would replicate its World War I strategies, but Germany once again used blitzkrieg, combining aerial bombardment with tank advances, quickly surrounding enemy forces. Around 1.5 million Allied soldiers were trapped at Dunkirk, with roughly 350,000 rescued to England by early June 1940, after which Dunkirk fell to the Nazis. Germany then moved into France, racing toward Paris, while Italy entered from the southeast. France's newly appointed government under Marshal Pétain signed an armistice. However, General Charles de Gaulle, exiled in London, broadcasted calls for continued resistance. Pétain moved the capital to Vichy, while northern and western France fell under German occupation. French naval vessels were seized by Germany. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union occupied Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania without conflict. By July 1940, almost all of continental Europe was under Axis control, except Spain and Portugal. The Germans then began bombing Britain in the famous Battle of Britain, targeting cities after initial military strikes went astray.
The air battle lasted from July 10th to October 31st, 1940, ending in British victory, but with heavy losses. Over 1,500 British pilots died, 1,744 aircraft destroyed. Germans lost over 2,500 pilots, 2,000 aircraft, and more than 700 were injured. Civilian casualties on both sides totaled around 15,000 dead and 20,000 wounded. In September 1940, Japan joined Germany and Italy, forming the Axis powers. While allied, Germany and Italy pursued different campaigns. Italy focused on expanding colonies, invading Albania, Greece, Egypt, and Ethiopia, often facing stiff resistance, requiring Germany to deploy forces to secure the Balkans. In 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, invading the Soviet Union to seize vast territories and settle Germans there. The invasion began on June 22, 1941, coincidentally, almost 129 years after Napoleon attempted a similar campaign against Russia on June 24, 1812, which ended disastrously. History repeated itself for Hitler. In the Pacific, the United States imposed sanctions on Japan, cutting essential oil and steel imports. Japan planned to seize colonies in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore, facing the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, drawing the U.S. into the war alongside Britain and France. Japan captured several Southeast Asian countries, while Germany began submarine warfare against British shipping in the Battle of the Atlantic from April 1942. That same year, the U.S. secretly began developing nuclear weapons under the Manhattan Project. By June 1942, the tide of war began to turn. The U.S. launched operations to reclaim Pacific Islands, and in Africa, Allied forces halted Axis advances, liberating colonies in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia by May 1943. In July 1943, the Allies began a three-pronged offensive to liberate Europe. From the east, the Red Army entered continental Europe. From the south, Allied forces landed in Sicily. And from the west, a massive force prepared to land on the French coast. The D-Day Normandy landings in June 1944 involved over 2.1 million troops, mainly from the US, Britain, and Canada. The three-pronged assault forced the Nazis back into Germany by January 1945. In February, Allied leaders met at Yalta to form a new world organization, replacing the League of Nations with the United Nations. By April, Soviet forces surrounded Berlin. Hitler committed suicide in May, 2 days before Germany's surrender. From June 1945, the Allies focused on Japan. After rejecting an unconditional surrender, the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August, killing around 250,000 people. Facing total devastation, Japan surrendered unconditionally on August 15th, signing the formal surrender on September 2, 1945. World War II not only caused unimaginable death and destruction, but it also reshaped global politics and society. The United Nations was born, and superpowers like the United States and the Soviet Union emerged. The Cold War, lasting almost half a century, became yet another dramatic chapter in history following the Second World War.